It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime. A family of 4, smiling for selfies on the deck of a luxurious cruise ship, the sun dipping low on the Caribbean horizon behind them. Tropical drinks, endless buffets, and blue ocean as far as the eye could see, the perfect backdrop for a dream vacation. But just days into the voyage, everything changed. Without warning, without explanation, without a trace. An entire family, mother, father, 2 young kids, gone. Vanished into thin air somewhere between 2 ports. No mayday call. No witnesses. No evidence. Just 4 cabin beds left untouched and cold. The cruise line said they likely fell overboard. Case closed. But if that were true, why did a message in a bottle wash up on a remote Florida beach nearly 2 years later, with a note that simply read, "They're watching. We were never supposed to be here." You clicked on this video because you want to know what really happened. And I promise you, by the time you finish watching, you will. But I have to warn you, this story is darker, deeper, and far more disturbing than what the headlines told you. Stay with me. Now, take a breath. Look around the room you're in. Maybe you're watching this from your couch, maybe lying in bed, maybe even listening while driving to work. Wherever you are, let me pull you in, not just into this story, but into the experience of it. Because this isn't just another cold case or missing persons mystery. This is a psychological puzzle layered with secrets that have been hidden beneath waves for years. This is a trail of breadcrumbs left behind by a desperate mother who knew her time was running out. And the only reason we're even talking about it now is because someone, against all odds, found the one thing nobody was ever supposed to see: a weathered bottle sealed with wax, tangled in seaweed, half buried in sand, with a message that shouldn't exist. A message that changes everything. This isn't about coincidence. This is about a cover-up. And if you think that sounds like a conspiracy theory, keep watching. Because the truth is far stranger than fiction. Let's rewind the clock. July 12th, 2021. The Harmony Voyager, a floating city of a ship, departed Port Everglades in Florida for a 10-day cruise through the Caribbean. On board were nearly 4,000 passengers, each with their own reason for escaping everyday life, but none more eager than the Montgomery family. Alan and Rebecca Montgomery, mid-40s, both software engineers from Charlotte, North Carolina. Married 17 years. 2 kids, Ellie, 11, and Noah, 8. Smart, active, polite. The kind of family neighbors described as normal and loving, and the last people you'd expect something bad to happen to. You've heard that phrase before, right? The last people. We always say it after tragedy because we never see the signs until it's too late. But what if I told you this time there were signs? Hidden in plain sight. On social media posts. In security footage. Even in the seemingly innocent cabin room logs. Little things. Quiet warnings. All ignored until it was too late. Now here's where it gets strange. The Montgomerys boarded the ship, checked into cabin 9212, attended the welcome dinner, and even posted sunset selfies from the upper deck. But after day 3, they were never seen again. No one saw them leave. Their cabin door never opened. Room service trays remained untouched. Their phones went dark. Cruise staff assumed they'd gone ashore during the next port stop, but they hadn't. Their IDs and passports were still locked inside the safe. Their luggage untouched. And perhaps most disturbing of all, their kids' stuffed animals were still neatly arranged on the beds, just as they'd left them. Like they were planning to come back. But they never did. The official statement from the cruise line, and later, the Coast Guard, was brief. Presumed lost at sea. No foul play suspected. But that doesn't sit right with you, does it? Because it doesn't sit right with me either. And here's the thing. The Montgomerys weren't the first to disappear from that ship. Not even close. Over the past 7 years, the Harmony Voyager has had 5 similar incidents. All ruled accidental. All swept under the rug. But when we dug deeper, patterns began to emerge, and they all led back to one disturbing theory. Someone or something on board that ship doesn't want to be found. I know that sounds like something out of a horror movie, but bear with me, because the rabbit hole only goes deeper from here. In the months after the Montgomery family vanished, Rebecca's sister, a quiet librarian named Rachel Kerr, began her own investigation. She didn't trust the cruise line story. She didn't believe her sister just fell overboard. And more than anything, she believed in one thing: Rebecca would never leave her kids behind. Rachel quit her job, maxed out her credit cards, and began tracking down anyone who'd been on that ship during the Montgomery's final voyage. And what she found was terrifying. Passengers who remembered hearing knocking noises in the hallway at night. Reports of static-filled calls from cabin phones that were supposed to be disconnected. A bartender who claimed to have seen Rebecca arguing with a man in a black uniform who wasn't part of the crew. Each clue led to another, until Rachel herself vanished while staying at a hotel near the Miami port, just 2 days before she was set to go public with her findings. Her phone was found in her room. Her car was still in the parking lot. But she was gone. Her notes, too. Wiped. Every file she had collected in over a year of digging disappeared. Which brings us to the message in the bottle. February 3rd, 2024. A beachcomber walking along a stretch of empty shoreline near Cocoa Beach, Florida, spots a green bottle lodged in driftwood. At first, he thinks it's garbage. But when he picks it up, he notices the wax-sealed cap. Inside is a tightly rolled note, badly water-stained but still legible. The handwriting is frantic. Panicked. The ink smeared like someone wrote it in a storm. It reads, "If you're reading this, they didn't find it. We're alive, or we were. They took us below deck. Not crew. Not human. There are rooms the maps don't show. I left breadcrumbs. Find the cameras. Tell Rachel. Tell my sister I didn't give up. We were never supposed to be here." The note was signed Rebecca. Now pause. Think about that for a second. If this message is real, and we have verified that the handwriting matches Rebecca Montgomery's journal entries, it changes everything. It suggests the Montgomery family didn't fall overboard. They were taken. It also suggests they made it through at least part of their ordeal alive. And it hints at something chilling, that their disappearance wasn't an isolated event, but part of a larger, coordinated operation that's been hiding beneath our noses the entire time. So ask yourself, what could be so dangerous, so secretive, and so well hidden on a cruise ship that multiple families could vanish without a single passenger noticing? In the next part of this video, we're going to follow the exact trail Rebecca left behind, from the security camera files the cruise line never wanted released, to a hidden corridor discovered by a janitor who was later fired without cause. We'll speak to former staff who broke their NDAs just to bring the truth forward. And we'll show you a piece of footage that was leaked only weeks ago, showing what appears to be a locked door opening and something stepping out that looks human but isn't. By the end of this video, you'll see what others weren't allowed to. And you'll understand why this story was buried so deep. But before we go there, there's one more thing you need to see. A voicemail left on Rachel Kerr's phone, timestamped 2 hours before her own disappearance. It's distorted, nearly inaudible. But with some audio recovery, we've been able to enhance it. The voice, believed to be Rebecca, says just 6 words. "Don't trust the captain. He knew." Now you understand why this story isn't just another tragedy. It's a warning. And it may already be too late. In the weeks leading up to the cruise, Rebecca Montgomery's life seemed, by all appearances, perfectly normal. But when you start peeling back the layers, something unsettling begins to surface. Alan had just wrapped up a major software deployment for a cybersecurity firm based out of Charlotte, a company known more for its government contracts than public transparency. Rebecca had been working remotely as a UX designer for a health app startup that recently landed a controversial partnership with a military research facility. On the surface, these jobs didn't raise alarms. But when cross-referenced with several names found in Rebecca's private planner, names that don't match coworkers or friends, a different pattern begins to form. One of those names, T. Weldon, appears 3 times under entries marked urgent, "Do not tell Alan." That's not the kind of thing a wife scribbles casually. And it makes you wonder, what was she hiding? Family and friends described Rebecca as intuitive and protective, someone with a gut instinct so sharp, she often noticed things others missed. According to her best friend, Laura Whitman, Rebecca had confided in her just 2 weeks before the cruise that she felt like someone was following her. At the time, Laura chalked it up to stress. The Montgomerys had been receiving strange phone calls, always from unknown numbers, always with silence on the other end. At first, they laughed it off. Then Rebecca's email was hacked. Their Ring doorbell caught a man in a gray hoodie loitering on their front porch, and their dog, a calm retriever named Milo, started growling at empty spaces in the house. Alan dismissed it all as coincidence. But Rebecca didn't. She started locking every door twice. She began keeping her phone in airplane mode. And she told Laura something else, something haunting. If anything happens to us on this cruise, don't believe the headlines. Start with the ship. Then look under it. That statement sat uneasily with Laura until months later, when the family was reported missing. But by then, there was no one left to ask questions. The cruise line stonewalled reporters. Local police deferred to federal investigators. And the Montgomerys' home, once filled with laughter, now sat eerily empty, mail piling up, a half-finished Lego castle still on the kitchen counter, and a calendar still flipped to July. But let's back up, because here's where it gets more bizarre. The couple didn't originally plan to go on that cruise. In fact, their vacation had been scheduled for the Oregon coast, until, abruptly, Alan changed the destination and booked the Harmony Voyager instead, just days before the trip. He told Rebecca it was a last-minute upgrade. But the cruise had been fully booked for months, so how did he get 4 tickets, 2 adjoining suites, and private dining access with only 72 hours' notice? When we dug deeper, we discovered the reservation had been made using a personal email linked not to Alan, but to a burner account created less than a week before. That led us to our first red herring, a man named Dennis Hallberg, who used to work with Alan at the cybersecurity firm. Dennis was terminated after a whistleblower claim that never made it to court, but which reportedly involved unauthorized data extraction and off-the-books surveillance programs. When we reached out to Dennis, he refused to comment, citing an active non-disclosure agreement. But an anonymous tipster sent us a blurry photo of Dennis and Alan having coffee at a cafe near Charlotte just 4 days before the cruise. So now we have motive, proximity, and a timeline. But does that mean Dennis had something to do with the Montgomerys' disappearance? Or was he warning Alan of something that made Alan panic and reroute his entire family onto a different ship, one that just so happened to be linked to other disappearances? As we followed this twisted trail, we also started seeing inconsistencies in Rebecca's social media posts. Photos posted from the ship had metadata that didn't match the time zones they were supposedly taken in. One image, showing the family on the sun deck, was uploaded at 3:16 p.m. Eastern, but when we tracked the ship's exact coordinates, the vessel would have already been hours ahead, in a completely different position at sea. It's a small detail, but it hints at manipulation, like the photos were staged or worse, not posted by Rebecca at all. Then came the cruise surveillance footage, or rather, the footage we were told didn't exist. After repeated requests, we finally obtained partial internal logs from a former ship technician who risked his career to leak them. According to the logs, cabin 9212's door was open 5 times during a period when the Montgomerys were supposedly missing. Each entry was manually overridden using a master keycard. But here's the chilling part. There's no record of who used the card, and the camera outside the cabin? Disabled. And this brings us to the second major red herring, the captain. Captain Emil Navarro had helmed over 50 international voyages and was well known for his strict discipline and professionalism. But according to several former staff members, Navarro had a habit of disappearing during the night shift for hours at a time, usually to an area of the ship marked Maintenance B4, which doesn't appear on the standard passenger deck plans. This section, accessible only by elevator with a security override, is allegedly part of a service corridor that runs beneath the main decks. When asked, the cruise line dismissed it as a standard utility zone used for waste management and electrical access. But a leaked schematic suggests otherwise. The area spans over 1,200 square feet, far too large for just pipes and wires. One crew member described it as a black zone. You don't go there. You're told not to. Another claimed it housed equipment that had nothing to do with cruise operations, though they refused to elaborate further. Could this be what Rebecca meant in her message when she said, "They took us below deck"? We're not pointing fingers just yet. Maybe Navarro was following orders. Maybe he didn't know. But remember that voicemail left on Rachel Kerr's phone, the one that said, "Don't trust the captain." He knew. If that really was Rebecca's voice, then whatever happened below deck wasn't just some freak accident or mechanical failure. It was intentional, orchestrated, and the captain was at least aware, if not complicit. Still, we have to consider the possibility that Rebecca's message was a fabrication, that it was planted to send investigators in the wrong direction. Which brings us to the third red herring, a man known only as Mr. Gray. That's the name used in a reservation note attached to one of the adjoining cabins near the Montgomery families. The ID used to check in has since been flagged as fraudulent. No credit history. No paper trail. Just one grainy photo of a tall, pale man wearing mirrored sunglasses and a hooded sweatshirt, unusual attire for a luxury Caribbean cruise. One housekeeper reported seeing him leaving the hallway near the Montgomery's room late on day 3, carrying what appeared to be a black case the size of a child's backpack. No one has seen or heard from him since. The cabin registered to him was never entered again after the third day, and the sheets on the bed were still perfectly made when the ship returned to port. Some theorize he was part of a private security team, or maybe a contractor with covert clearance. Others believe he was following Rebecca or Alan and intended to intercept something they had brought on board. But what could that be? At this point in the story, you're probably asking the same question we are. What were the Montgomerys involved in that led to their disappearance? Were they victims of a corporate cover-up? Or did they uncover something on board that wasn't meant for civilian eyes? The fact that Rebecca left a message that made it to shore changes the stakes. This wasn't just a tragedy. It was a warning. And the more you dig, the more you realize this isn't just about one family. It's about a pattern, one stretching across multiple cruise lines, multiple countries, and nearly a decade of quietly filed missing persons reports. Passengers who vanished in the night. Surveillance footage that goes missing. Ship logs that don't match port records. And yet, there's one final piece of this puzzle that we haven't fully explained. One clue that brings every other theory into question. When the message in the bottle was found, there was something else inside besides Rebecca's note.
A key.
Rusted. Marked with the numbers 17B. That number doesn't appear on any publicly available deck map. But in the final leaked file from our ship technician source, 17B is listed under something called the Biometric Access Vault, a term that does not appear in any commercial cruise operations manual. We don't know what it unlocks. But whatever it is, someone didn't want it found. And now that it has been, someone else is watching. Just when it felt like the pieces were starting to align, like we were on the verge of finally cracking this thing wide open, something strange happened. The technician who had risked everything to leak the logs from the Harmony Voyager suddenly went silent. 1 minute, he was answering our encrypted messages, helping us navigate the ship's off-grid zones, and pointing us toward inconsistencies in the security records. The next?
Gone.
No response. His accounts deactivated. His number disconnected. When we tried to trace his last known location, all we found was a cheap motel room just outside of Tampa, rented under a false name and left in perfect condition, as if no one had ever been there at all. The only thing left behind was a torn envelope with the word "Stop" written in all caps across the front, and inside, a photo of Rebecca Montgomery, standing on the ship's upper deck, except this version of the photo wasn't like the one posted on social media. In this one, she's not smiling. She's staring off camera. Her face pale. Her hand clenched around something in her pocket. It was the first real sign that someone, maybe multiple people, were watching our every move. But the envelope wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. Whoever sent it had access to internal photos never made public. That meant they were either part of the investigation or manipulating it from the inside. And it didn't stop there. A key piece of evidence, the audio file containing the distorted voicemail believed to be from Rebecca, vanished from our shared cloud folder overnight.
Gone.
Wiped clean. Not corrupted, not deleted with a traceable IP. Just gone. The backup copy? Also erased. When we reached out to the forensic specialist helping us authenticate the file, they informed us, off the record, that their office had been visited by federal agents the day before, demanding access to their systems under the pretense of national security. No documentation, no paper trail, and once again, the trail went cold. That's when we started getting the calls. Blocked numbers, automated voices, static-filled recordings that played only fragments of sentences like, "It wasn't supposed to," or "They knew about 17B. The last message was clearer than the rest. A woman's voice.
Come.
Almost rehearsed. She said, "The family's alive. But if you keep going, you won't be." It shook us, not just because of the content, but because of how specific it was. No names. No demands. Just a veiled warning, laced with finality. At that point, we had to ask ourselves a hard question. Were we chasing a mystery, or were we becoming part of it? And just when we thought the paranoia couldn't go any deeper, we uncovered something we never expected. Alan Montgomery had a second life. Not a mistress. Not a hidden bank account. Something more elaborate. According to flight records cross-referenced with security checkpoint logs, Alan traveled under a second identity 4 times in the 6 months leading up to the cruise. The name? Marcus Hale. And under that name, he entered restricted areas of 2 known government buildings, both with ties to advanced AI development and deep-sea surveillance research. The kicker? One of those facilities is directly connected to a government program that tested sonar mapping aboard. Yes, you guessed it, commercial cruise ships retrofitted for data collection. Which means this vacation might never have been about relaxation. It may have been a mission from the beginning. But whose mission was it? Even more disturbing was what we learned about the bottle, the one that carried Rebecca's message to shore. A local fisherman who found it gave a sworn statement that a black SUV followed him for 2 days after he turned the bottle over to authorities. He said someone broke into his boat and stole his weather tracker, which had logged GPS coordinates of where the bottle was discovered. The area? Roughly 20 nautical miles off the coast of Bermuda, in a stretch of sea long speculated by conspiracy theorists as a Bermuda Triangle dead zone, where compasses glitch and sonar returns are inconsistent. Most write that off as folklore, but here's the problem. Satellite imaging of the ocean floor in that region shows an unusual structure, symmetrical, geometric, almost architectural, right beneath the last known signal ping from Rebecca's phone before it was shut off permanently. It was at this point we began to suspect that someone in our inner circle might not be who they claimed to be. One of our contacts, someone who had helped connect us to former ship employees, began feeding us conflicting information. Dates that didn't line up. Maps that suddenly changed. And most telling of all, their insistence that we drop the 17B angle and focus on more realistic leads like piracy or suicide. It was subtle, but persistent. Too persistent. When we dug into their background, we discovered that while their name checked out on LinkedIn and their references matched, their social security number had been issued only 3 years ago in a state they'd never lived in. A fabricated identity. But for what purpose? Were they trying to guide us toward the truth, or steer us away from it? What's becoming increasingly clear is that the story of the Montgomerys' disappearance is not just about a missing family. It's about a hidden network. Something below the surface, literally and metaphorically. Whether it's tied to classified technology, corporate espionage, or something more disturbing still, we don't know yet. But here's what we do know. Everything leads back to that vault. To 17B. And to the message that should have never made it to shore. What we found next changes everything. But we weren't supposed to find it. And what it shows wasn't meant for the public eye. Just when we thought the puzzle couldn't grow any darker, a new thread unraveled from a completely unexpected corner, one that none of us had even considered until now. Alan Montgomery's younger brother, Daniel, a quiet high school science teacher from Oregon, had mostly kept to himself after the disappearance. He never spoke to the press, never commented on social media, and never responded to outreach from journalists. But 3 days after we uncovered the truth about Alan's second identity, Marcus Hale, Daniel made contact. Not through a phone call or email. He sent a letter. A physical one, stamped and unsigned, dropped anonymously into the mailbox of the independent investigator we'd hired to track down cruise ship anomalies. The envelope was unmarked, but inside was a single USB drive and a short note written in all caps. "If you're going TO, tell the story. Tell it all." At first glance, the drive appeared blank. No files, no folders, just a string of corrupted data logs. But once decrypted, it revealed something we weren't prepared for. A copy of a video clip, time-stamped 2 weeks before the cruise set sail, showing Alan Montgomery and Daniel sitting in what looked like a private garage, reviewing a set of documents laid out on the hood of a car. The video didn't have audio, but one frame stood out. Alan pointing to a map, then circling a location marked Silent Zone. Do not transmit. The coordinates matched the exact point where Rebecca's bottle had surfaced weeks later. Which raises a terrifying question. Did Daniel know what was going to happen before it ever did? Was he a bystander swept into a dangerous secret, or was he complicit in something far more orchestrated? Just hours after we obtained the clip, Daniel went missing. His house was found abandoned, his personal laptop destroyed, and his car left idling near the edge of a dense forest trail in Tillamook County. The only thing left behind was a plastic evidence bag pinned to the windshield wiper. Inside it, a torn page from a ship's technical manual with a heading that read, Chamber 17B, Acoustic Feedback Protocols, Classified Use Only. The implication was immediate and unnerving. This wasn't just a storage room or a misfiled maintenance closet aboard the ship. It was part of something experimental, likely involving high-frequency sound or signal suppression. And now we had 2 pieces of the puzzle that weren't supposed to exist. That someone clearly wanted to stay hidden. But the mystery didn't end there. As we scrambled to trace Daniel's last steps, we were blindsided by yet another twist. An anonymous email sent to our encrypted tip line dropped a bombshell. A former cruise guest, a woman named Celia Torres, who had traveled on the same ship just 3 weeks prior to the Montgomery family's departure, reported receiving a strange voicemail only days after disembarking. The voice in the message was garbled, distorted by what sounded like interference or underwater static, but one phrase stood out with chilling clarity. "They're not gone, they were taken." Celia had chalked it up to a prank or a wrong number, until she started seeing signs that she was being followed. Her work computer accessed remotely, her dog poisoned, her tires slashed, and most disturbingly, a photograph left on her porch one night showing the Montgomerys smiling on the cruise deck, with Celia in the background, completely unaware she was ever in the same frame. The photo had never been taken by her. It hadn't been posted online. Whoever had it not only knew where she'd been, but also what she never realized she'd seen. This second storyline cracked the entire narrative open. Now we had to ask ourselves, was this about a single family, or were there multiple passengers marked for something they never signed up for? Was the cruise line itself being used as a test bed for something bigger, something hidden beneath the surface of what seemed like an ordinary vacation? The theory seemed far-fetched at first. But when we examined the passenger logs from that voyage and compared them with those from the Montgomery's trip, something disturbing came to light. 15 names appeared on both manifests. Different cabin numbers. No obvious connections. But every one of those individuals had either disappeared, reported harassment, or gone completely off the grid in the months following their respective cruises. We started reaching out. Only one responded. He called himself Mike R., a retired electronics contractor from Nevada who claimed to have seen something aboard the ship that wasn't meant for human eyes. He refused to speak on camera, but during a late-night call riddled with pauses, he told us that he was woken one night by a low, rhythmic humming that seemed to vibrate through the walls. When he followed the noise through an unsecured stairwell near the ship's lower levels, he ended up in a corridor that didn't appear on any of the official deck maps. It was cold, unusually quiet, and smelled like iodine and melted plastic. He turned back before reaching the end, but not before seeing a series of doors marked with alphanumeric labels, one of which was 17B. When he reported it to the front desk the next morning, the staff dismissed him. But that night, someone entered his cabin while he slept. He knew because when he woke up, the photo of his late wife, one he kept on the nightstand, had been moved to the bathroom counter. a silent warning that they could get to him anytime, any place. Now we were dealing with overlapping mysteries. Passengers receiving cryptic messages. A brother who may have known more than he let on. Vanishing evidence. Deleted files. A vault that no one's willing to acknowledge exists. And everywhere we turned, someone was one step ahead, clearing tracks, erasing records, manipulating timelines. Each clue led to another shadow. Each answer unearthed two more questions. And now, a horrifying possibility had crept into our minds. What if the Montgomerys weren't the only ones who vanished? What if they were just the beginning? The next clue didn't come from a person. It came from a ship itself. Or, more specifically, from a subcontractor who had worked on the Harmony Voyager's recent retrofits. He had been hired to install new acoustic insulation in lower decks. Nothing classified, nothing unusual, just standard ship work. But what he discovered during the installation was anything but standard. In the bulkhead behind 17B, he found wiring inconsistent with standard maritime electrical systems, copper-fused conduits that weren't attached to the main grid, but instead led to a standalone panel labeled Sigma. The ship's maintenance manual didn't mention it. The cruise line schematics didn't include it. But Sigma matches a keyword we'd seen before, in that deleted message, in the damaged voicemail, in a set of surveillance logs we'd been told didn't exist. What does Sigma mean? Is it a project name? A cover-up? A reference to the signal that may have triggered everything? And more urgently, who else is trying to silence those who get too close? The next step we take is risky. The message in a bottle may not be the only thing that floated ashore. And what we're about to find might explain why so many people keep disappearing. It happened on a rainy Thursday night, just after midnight. The kind of night when the streets are slick, the air smells like copper and rain, and the world seems quieter than it should be. The main character, let's just call him Jack for now, had been staying in a small Airbnb on the outskirts of Galveston, Texas, close to the port where the Harmony Voyager had originally launched. He'd gone there to retrace the Montgomery family's last confirmed steps, hoping that proximity might jog something loose, some overlooked fact, some old record, some dock worker who remembered a strange conversation. But by the fourth day, Jack knew something was off. He kept getting the feeling he was being watched. It started with a black SUV parked on the far end of the street. It wasn't just the same make and model, it was the exact same vehicle, with the same slight dent in the bumper and the same half-peeled inspection sticker. He'd seen it outside a coffee shop, at the gas station, and now right across from the rental house, engines still faintly running. At first, he tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just another guest. Maybe it was coincidence. But when he went outside with his phone to snap a picture, the SUV pulled away. No headlights. Just silence, and a taillight that flickered red once before vanishing into the darkness. That was when the real fear settled in. The kind of fear that doesn't shout, it whispers. That tells you you're not crazy, even when the world wants you to believe you are. Jack knew he wasn't imagining it. Because 2 days later, someone broke into the house. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was touched. Except for one thing, the bottle. Rebecca Montgomery's bottle. The very one that had started all of this. Jack had brought it with him, hoping to examine the handwriting again under different lighting. He'd kept it locked in a case, wrapped in cloth, placed beneath the bed. Now the case was wide open, the cloth folded neatly beside it, and the bottle completely gone. In its place sat a single white business card with no name, no number, nothing except one sentence in bold black font. "Stop looking, or you'll be next." It hit him like a punch to the chest. Up until now, everything had been about other people. The Montgomerys. Daniel.
Celia.
Mike R. He'd been following their stories, tracing their lives, assembling a puzzle where he was just the observer. But this was different. This was personal. Someone knew where he was staying, knew what he was carrying, and wanted him to know they were close. Too close. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat in the corner of the room with his back to the wall, every window blind pulled down, a kitchen knife clutched in one hand and his laptop open in the other, eyes scanning through security cam footage from a doorbell camera he'd installed himself on the front porch. At 3:43 a.m., the feed glitched. just for 5 seconds. But when it came back, there was a figure standing just outside the camera's frame, barely visible, wearing a hood, unmoving, silent. No knock, no motion, just a figure watching the door until the camera blinked again and the frame went dark. That's when Jack knew this wasn't just a mystery, it was a warning. And the danger wasn't in the clues. It was in the truth itself. Because whatever happened on that ship wasn't meant to be discovered. The Montgomerys didn't vanish by accident. They were erased. And now, piece by piece, it seemed like someone was trying to erase the investigation too. But it got worse. Jack's contact inside the cruise line, someone we'll call Ava, had been feeding him encrypted internal memos from her department for weeks. At first, the messages were small, hush mentions of crew member reassignments, updates to security footage policies, the sudden deletion of passenger complaints from the corporate servers. But the last message she sent came with a subject line in all caps. "We need TO meet. Now." They agreed on a neutral spot, a diner off I-45 near the NASA Johnson Space Center, a place Ava said would be clean. Jack got there early, waited in a back booth. But Ava never showed. When he tried calling, the number was disconnected. When he emailed, it bounced. Her social media profiles were gone, her LinkedIn scrubbed, her company email account deactivated. It was like she never existed. Except Jack knew she had. She was real. She had a face, a voice, a nervous laugh when she talked about sneaking memos past her supervisor. And now she was just gone. There was no denying it anymore. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a cover-up. And it was getting more desperate by the day. The question wasn't just what happened to the Montgomerys, it was how many people had to be silenced to keep it hidden. Was Sigma a government operation? A rogue test program? An AI-driven system that malfunctioned? Or worse, performed exactly as designed? Every direction Jack turned felt like walking deeper into fog. No way back, no clarity, just shadows moving faster than he could keep up with. And then one final twist. That night, as Jack went back to the house to pack his things and leave town, he opened his email and found one new message. No subject line. No sender. Just a video attachment. He hesitated, heart thudding, the cursor hovering over the file. When it finally opened, it was grainy and gray, clearly captured by a surveillance cam. The angle was strange, low, tilted. But the location was unmistakable. It was inside Chamber 17B. The feed showed a person sitting on the floor, arms wrapped around their knees, rocking slowly back and forth. Their face obscured by hair. Their clothes tattered, soaked. And on the wall behind them, scratched in desperate loops over and over again, the same 4 words, "They know you're here." The timestamp on the video? Just 3 hours old. Someone somewhere was still alive. But Jack had no idea if it was a cry for help or a trap. Jack sat in a motel just outside Corpus Christi, blinds shut, lights dimmed, with his laptop casting the only glow in the room. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, mind racing through everything he'd uncovered. The message in the bottle, the footage from Chamber 17B, the disappearance of Ava. It all pointed toward some large, coordinated cover-up. But something about that video gnawed at him. The timestamp was recent, but the security badge on the wall in the background? It was an older logo, one the company hadn't used in over a year. Jack dug deeper, tracing frame by frame until he found something no one had noticed, a reflection. In the bottom corner of the footage, distorted and blurred, was the unmistakable glint of eyeglasses, glasses that looked exactly like the pair worn by Daniel Montgomery, the father who was supposedly among the vanished. Jack froze. If this footage was new, how could Daniel be there? Had he been alive this whole time? Or worse, had he never left? That was when everything tilted. Jack accessed archived footage from the cruise ship's departure, stored on a separate server he'd hacked weeks ago. There, clear as day, were Rebecca, Celia, and even little Maddie walking up the gangway. But no Daniel. There was no record of him ever stepping aboard the Harmony Voyager. No boarding pass. No facial recognition hit. Not even his name on the ship's official manifest. It didn't make sense. Every family photo posted on social media before the cruise showed him right beside them, grinning, waving, hugging his daughter. Yet somehow, from the moment the ship left the dock, Daniel vanished from the records. That's when it hit Jack like a gut punch. What if Daniel had orchestrated the entire disappearance? Before he could process it fully, his burner phone buzzed. Unknown number. One word. Meet. The address led him to a roadside diner near the Louisiana border. The place was nearly empty, jukebox humming softly in the background. And sitting in the far booth, sipping black coffee, was a man Jack hadn't seen in weeks, Mike R. But something was different. He looked cleaner, more alert, like someone who'd shaken off a mask. Mike motioned for him to sit, then dropped the bomb. I lied, he said flatly. I knew Daniel. We worked together. We both did, before Sigma.
Jack didn't speak. Couldn't.
His mind reeled as Mike continued, revealing that Sigma wasn't just a software project or a cruise safety system. It was a live psychological test designed to study long-term group behavior under artificial threat. The Montgomerys weren't just passengers, they were subjects. But something went wrong. Daniel wasn't supposed to be part of the test. He infiltrated the system, manipulated the parameters, and inserted his own family into the trial. According to Mike, Daniel had grown obsessed with proving that the system could be bent, twisted to expose weakness in even the most well-designed environments. He wanted to break it, Mike said, to prove it couldn't predict the unpredictable. The kicker? That message in the bottle? Jack thought it had been written by Rebecca. But when he asked Mike about the handwriting, Mike just smiled bitterly. That's Daniel's hand, he said. He sent that message. He wanted someone to follow the trail. And he wanted it to be you. Everything Jack thought he knew was suddenly flipped. Daniel wasn't a victim. He was the puppet master. And Jack hadn't been uncovering the truth. He'd been playing out the next step in Daniel's twisted experiment. Every piece of evidence had been planted. Every lead had been engineered. Even Ava? She wasn't a whistleblower, Mike admitted. She was Daniel's insurance policy. Her disappearance was staged. Jack's stomach churned. The people he'd trusted, the clues he'd clung to, they were part of a narrative designed to pull him deeper. He looked back at the footage from Chamber 17B. The figure in the shadows. The scratched message on the wall. They know you're here. But now he wondered, was that a warning to Jack? Or from Daniel to his observers? What if Jack wasn't watching Daniel? What if Daniel was watching him? And just when Jack thought he'd reached the edge of the truth, Mike reached into his coat and slid a folded piece of paper across the table. This came 2 hours ago, he said. Left in my car windshield. No note. No explanation. Jack unfolded the paper and felt the blood drain from his face. It was a photo. A current one. Taken from a security camera across the street from the Galveston Airbnb. In the frame was Jack himself, standing in the doorway, holding the case with the message bottle. But standing behind him, barely visible in the shadows, was a man in glasses. Daniel Montgomery. Smiling. The twist wasn't that the Montgomerys vanished. The real twist was that one of them never left. And now he was back, watching everything unfold exactly as he'd planned. Jack sat alone in his car, the motel key dangling from his fingers, the photo of Daniel and himself laid out on the dashboard like an unspoken threat. The weight of what he had just learned crushed down on him with a force that made his chest feel hollow. It wasn't just about the Montgomerys anymore. It wasn't even about Sigma. It was about how far this thing reached, how close it had crept to him without ever making a sound. And now, he couldn't tell if he was still the investigator, or the next subject in Daniel Montgomery's psychological war. His phone buzzed again, but it wasn't a message this time. It was a video. 30 seconds long. No sender. He hesitated before pressing play. The footage was shaky, like it had been recorded from someone's sleeve. A narrow hallway, fluorescent lights flickering. Then the camera panned, revealing a face he recognized immediately. Emily. She wasn't just a journalist. She was his closest friend, his one anchor through this chaos, the only one he hadn't doubted, until now. In the video, she stood with her arms crossed, staring at someone off-screen, her voice low but firm. He's getting too close. If he finds the original servers, it's over. He has to be stopped. Jack's heart slammed in his chest. Emily had access to the servers. She was the one who first gave him the anonymous tip, the one who found the bottle's coordinates in the shipping logs. Every clue, every hint he'd followed to this point, she had been the starting point. And now it was clear she wasn't helping him uncover the truth. She was making sure he followed the story Daniel wanted him to see. Jack drove for hours that night, unsure of where he was going. He stopped only when the fuel gauge blinked empty and found himself near an old marina, the smell of salt in the air. It reminded him of the cruise terminal, the docks, the beginning of everything. He pulled out his burner phone and dialed Emily. No answer. Again. Voicemail. He knew she would call back, but he also knew he had to be ready for what came next.
This was no longer about trust.
It was about survival. And then the phone buzzed again. A voice message this time. Jack, you're in danger. You're being watched. They're not who you think. Meet me at the place where we first talked about Sigma. Don't bring anything. Don't tell anyone. His instincts screamed at him to ignore it. Everything in his gut told him this could be a trap. But then again, maybe Emily wasn't a traitor. Maybe she had been forced to play along to protect herself. Or maybe she was playing both sides. That's when he realized this wasn't just about what he knew, it was about what he was willing to sacrifice to find the truth. Jack had two options.
He could run.
Leave town, bury the story, and protect what little peace he still had. Or he could go to that meeting spot, look Emily in the eyes, and finally ask the question that had been buried beneath every clue, every secret, every lie. What really happened to Daniel Montgomery? But it wouldn't be that simple. Before he could decide, his motel door rattled. Not a knock, an aggressive, deliberate shake. He crept to the peephole, heart hammering. No one was there. But taped to the outside of the door was another envelope. Inside was a single slip of paper with typed words. Choose her or choose the truth. You don't get both. Jack sat back against the wall, his mind spinning with fear, betrayal, and the gnawing sense that he had already crossed a line he couldn't come back from. The stakes weren't just high, they were absolute. Emily's life. His own sanity. The truth about what Sigma really was. He could save one. Maybe. But at the cost of the other. And somewhere out there, Daniel Montgomery was still moving the pieces, always one step ahead, still watching. Jack didn't sleep. He couldn't. Not after the envelope. Not after Emily's voice message. The motel room felt smaller by the minute, the ticking of the wall clock a metronome for rising dread. As dawn crept over the cracked blinds, he replayed every conversation, every late-night call with Emily, every seemingly innocent suggestion she'd made, from the map coordinates to the old harbor records. It had all felt organic, genuine. But now, it reeked of orchestration. And yet, part of him still hoped she was caught in this mess just like he was. Maybe she was being blackmailed. Maybe she had no choice. But Jack had been chasing maybes for too long. It was time for answers. He left the motel without a word, driving straight to the location mentioned in Emily's message, an abandoned warehouse near the pier, once used to offload shipping containers before the newer terminals opened. It was where they'd first discovered Sigma's trail in the leaked documents, a random line of code, embedded in cruise ship passenger logs, that shouldn't have been there. That day had marked the beginning of everything. Now, it might be where it all ended. The building loomed like a dying relic of industry, rusted and forgotten. Jack stepped inside, his breath echoing against the concrete walls. And there she was, Emily, waiting in the center of the room with a satchel at her feet and her hands up, palms open like she was surrendering to something bigger than herself. You came, she whispered. Jack didn't move. Tell me the truth, he said flatly. All of it. Her eyes welled up, and for a moment, he saw the same woman who'd stayed up nights decoding files beside him, the one who had promised they'd chase this thing together no matter where it led. But her next words shattered that image forever. Jack, Sigma isn't a corporation. It's not a hacker group. It's a program. A behavioral experiment designed to test manipulation on a societal scale, controlled from within the cruise industry. They're using vacations to study human decision-making, loyalty, emotional breaking points. Everyone on that ship, Daniel, his wife, the kids, they weren't just passengers. They were subjects. And so were you. His knees nearly buckled. What? He choked out. What do you mean I was a subject? Emily's voice shook. They knew you'd come looking. They predicted your involvement down to the hour. Every clue, every lead. It wasn't accidental. You're part of the data, Jack. You were never investigating Sigma. You were being monitored by it. She reached into her satchel slowly, pulled out a folder thick with photos and reports. One paper slid free and floated to the floor. It was a photo of Jack from 3 years ago, leaving a counseling session, looking over his shoulder. The caption underneath read, Test candidate number 029874, primary exposure phase. The air vanished from Jack's lungs. You've been working with them, he whispered. This whole time. Emily stepped forward. Not by choice. They threatened my sister. They gave me a role, handler. But I kept you alive, Jack. I led you away from the deeper layers. I tried to protect you while I still could. But Jack barely heard her. He was staring at another page in the file now. One with timestamps from earlier that week. GPS logs from his car. Transcripts from phone calls he'd never recorded. They hadn't just tracked him. They had built the path for him. A loud metallic clink snapped their attention upward. Footsteps echoed from the stairwell above. They're here, Emily breathed. We have to go.
Now.
But Jack didn't move. How many people? He demanded. How many are in on this? She shook her head. Hundreds. Maybe more. Law enforcement. Crews, security. Tech firms. The bottle, you think that was a fluke? That was part of the initiation. It was all bait. Before Jack could respond, the warehouse doors slammed shut with a mechanical hiss. A voice echoed over hidden speakers, calm and corporate. Test candidate number 029874. Exposure complete. Time to conclude phase 2. Emily screamed and pulled Jack by the arm. They sprinted to the back exit, only to find it chained shut from the outside. The walls suddenly felt alive, like they were inside a stage set. Like the entire building was part of a lab experiment. Jack's mind reeled. Every moment from the last 3 months, every person he had spoken to, every dead end, every coded message, it had all been tracked, measured, and graded. But for what? Control? Entertainment? And if Sigma had been running this long without detection, how many other people were out there, chasing ghosts they didn't realize had been planted? Jack turned to Emily, betrayal and fear warring in his chest. What do they want now? She looked down, too ashamed to answer. But Jack already knew. They wanted closure. They wanted to see what he'd do next. Would he run? Would he destroy the files? Would he kill her? Or would he play their game to the end? The concrete stairwell spiraled downward like a descent into some hidden underworld, each step colder than the last. Jack's heart hammered in his chest, every muscle screaming to stop, turn back, escape, but his mind was locked in. This was it. Beneath the abandoned warehouse, behind rusted steel doors, past decades of secrets and shadows, lay the final truth. Emily had given him the key card she wasn't supposed to keep. Her hands trembled as she slipped it into his pocket and whispered, "You are right about everything, but it's worse than we thought." She hadn't followed him down. He wasn't sure if it was fear or guilt that kept her at the top, but Jack descended alone, into Sigma's final air. The keycard beeped, the red light turned green, and the reinforced door hissed open with sterile precision. Inside, the world changed. Bright white lights bathed the underground command center in artificial clarity. Walls of screens displayed surveillance feeds, footage from cruise ship cabins, airports, even hospital waiting rooms. Hundreds, maybe thousands of lives cataloged like files in a digital morgue. Every decision logged, every emotional reaction measured. At the center of it all stood a man in a perfectly pressed gray suit, hands clasped behind his back like he'd been expecting Jack for hours. He looked eerily calm, like a doctor prepping for a routine procedure. "Mr. Callahan," the man greeted, voice smooth and neutral, "candidate number 029874. You weren't supposed to get this far. Jack stepped inside, keeping his eyes on the monitors. What is this? He demanded. Some kind of surveillance hub? Behavior manipulation? The man offered a shallow smile. We call it predictive social modeling. But yes, surveillance plays a role. You see, we don't predict people. We guide them. A small push here. A suggestion there. We observed how you processed trauma after your brother's death. That cruise he took with his family, the one he never returned from, it was our pilot study. You've been connected to Sigma far longer than you realize. Jack's mouth went dry. Daniel was part of the experiment? The man tilted his head. Part of a variable group. He was flagged early as a resistor. Strong moral compass. Family-first mentality. A risk, but also a useful case study. He walked to one of the control consoles and tapped a screen. Up popped a clip, grainy footage of Daniel on the ship deck, arguing with a crew member. Another screen showed a time-stamped memo. Subject becoming non-compliant. Trigger Phase 2 intervention. Jack watched in horror as the video cut to black. You killed him, Jack said, barely able to speak. No, the man replied, without emotion. We removed him from the system. People don't disappear anymore. They're absorbed into new structures. Reassigned. Reframed. The cruise wasn't just an experiment. It was a funnel. A behavioral farm for the next generation of thought leaders, media personalities, even elected officials. You think your government makes decisions alone? Sigma builds the data. They follow the math. Jack could barely breathe. Why me? Why keep feeding me breadcrumbs? Because we needed to know if truth still mattered, the man said with clinical detachment. If someone could reach the center without being bought, broken, or redirected. And now we know. Suddenly, alarms blared. The lights dimmed. On-screen data feeds began to flash red. Jack's burner phone buzzed in his pocket. A single text. Emily, get out now. They know I told you everything. They're scrubbing the servers. In a flash, Jack lunged toward the console. The man reached for a concealed weapon, but Jack was faster. He slammed the butt of a nearby fire extinguisher into the man's shoulder, sending him crashing to the floor. Jack ripped open the control panel and shoved the encrypted drive Emily had given him into the master port. It was a race now, one man trying to kill the evidence, the other trying to set it free. As files streamed to the drive, warnings popped up. Remote wipe initiated. Containment breach. Jack's hands flew over the keys. He launched the satellite uplink, targeting a secure public cloud address, one Emily had given him months ago, hidden in a crossword puzzle she slipped under his hotel room door. She had been planning this, preparing him, betting he would make it this far. The man struggled to his feet, blood dripping from his temple. You think exposing this will matter? He hissed. People will call it a hoax. A conspiracy theory. You'll be labeled a fringe lunatic. I don't care what they call me, Jack snapped. I just want them to know. He hit the final command. The transfer completed. The drive blinked once, then died in his hands. The servers exploded into static. The room plunged into darkness, just as a backup generator roared to life. But then another twist. From the far side of the chamber, a hidden screen flickered on. A familiar voice echoed through the room, Emily's. But this wasn't a live message. It was recorded. If you're watching this, Jack, it means I didn't make it out. It means I finally did the right thing, even if too late. You were the constant. The only real factor they never accounted for. You weren't just a test subject. You were my escape plan. The screen cut to footage of her speaking into a webcam, emotion etched across her face. Sigma didn't just manipulate strangers. They manipulated me. They rewrote my sister's entire identity, gave her a new life in exchange for my loyalty. I thought I could outplay them. I was wrong. But maybe, just maybe, you'll do what I couldn't. The video ended. Jack stood in silence, the final truth crashing over him. Emily hadn't betrayed him. She'd sacrificed herself to give him this shot. The last breadcrumb wasn't a clue, it was a goodbye. Outside, the faint sound of sirens began to echo. Backup. Not from Sigma, but from whistleblowers. Journalists. People he'd quietly contacted during his investigation. The files were spreading. The truth was already out. But before he left, Jack turned back to the man now slumped against the wall, defeated but still smiling. "What are you grinning at?" Jack demanded. The man coughed, then whispered, "This wasn't the end, Jack. This was phase 3. And then the power died completely. Days later, the world felt heavier, but clearer. Jack sat alone on a park bench in a city he barely recognized anymore, not because it had changed, but because he had. The files had gone public within hours, flooding the internet, hijacking trending hashtags, dominating the YouTube search bar, cable news cycles, and podcasts alike. Sigma Exposed was now more than just a headline, it was a reckoning. Millions watched footage of the experiments, the manipulation, the engineered disappearances masked as random events. Leaked videos showed boardroom discussions where lives were mapped like game pieces, surveillance tagged with predictive labels like non-compliant, convertible, expendable. People were outraged, terrified, glued to their screens as journalists pieced together the twisted puzzle Jack had uncovered at great personal cost. But as much as the world wanted closure, real justice remained elusive. Sigma wasn't just a group of individuals, it was a mindset, a network of influence that spanned continents, corporations, and institutions. For every name exposed, 10 more slipped into shadows. There were arrests, resignations, performative speeches about reform, but Jack had seen enough to know this was just a scratch on the surface. He hadn't heard from Emily since that final message played in the bunker. He still didn't know if she had escaped or sacrificed herself to buy him time. A burned vehicle found near the outskirts of the city matched the description of the one she had driven, but no body was recovered. The agency insisted the fire was accidental, a tragic coincidence, but Jack didn't believe in coincidence anymore. Still, he carried her voice with him, not just the words she spoke, but the weight behind them. The regret, the courage, the choice to trust him when she didn't have to. It haunted him in a way that didn't feel like a curse, but a responsibility. A memorial had quietly appeared outside an old warehouse, flowers, handwritten notes, and small trinkets left by families of missing cruise passengers, whistleblowers, and others who had vanished during Sigma's reign of silence. People who once believed their loved ones had simply run away or died mysteriously now knew the truth. It didn't bring them back, but it gave them a name to grieve, a villain to hold accountable, a reason to demand more from the world they lived in. Jack visited that memorial every day, not to mourn but to remind himself that this wasn't about vengeance. It was about remembering why the truth mattered in the first place. The government launched a public investigation, with hearings streamed live and millions watching. Some labeled it America's new Watergate, while others believed it was just another show. But a deeper conversation had begun about privacy, manipulation, data tracking, and just how easily trust could be weaponized. YouTube exploded with reaction videos, breakdowns of Sigma strategies, interviews with former operatives who had turned state's witness. The algorithm war became a trending search term overnight. Jack's name was everywhere, but he refused every interview. He didn't want to be famous. He just wanted to disappear into the quiet and know that he had done something that mattered. Yet even in the quiet, there were signs. Emails arriving with no sender. Surveillance cameras at corners where there hadn't been any before. A stranger on the subway who locked eyes with him for just a second too long. And then one night, a small envelope slid beneath his apartment door. No return address, no markings. Inside was a single photograph. Grainy, blurry, but unmistakable. Emily, alive, somewhere cold, wearing a coat Jack had never seen before, standing in front of what looked like a Russian border station. Written in red ink on the back were just 2 words, "Keep going." Jack stared at the photo for a long time, the weight of everything pressing in again. Maybe Sigma hadn't been destroyed, only exposed. Maybe this fight wasn't over, just paused. But for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel powerless. He didn't feel alone. He folded the photo carefully, slid it into the lining of his jacket, and walked back into the world with something resembling hope. Because the truth had a heartbeat now. And as long as it kept beating, so would he.